The night everything changed arrived quietly, wrapped in the low hum of a dying refrigerator and the smell of rain leaking through a cracked kitchen window. Michael sat alone at the small wooden table, staring at the unpaid bills spread out like accusations, when Sarah stood behind him with trembling hands and a voice barely strong enough to survive the moment. Her father, she explained without quoting him, believed Michael needed a wife if he ever wanted to be taken seriously, if he ever wanted to stop drifting through life like a man half awake. What Michael felt in that instant was not anger or pride, but a sudden, crushing fear of being seen so clearly. He looked at Sarah, at the exhaustion in her eyes, and made a decision that would alter both of their lives forever. He asked her to stay. Not out of obligation, not out of pressure, but because something fragile and hopeful had just been born between them. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of love that grows in broken places, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Michael had never planned to be a man who needed saving. He grew up in a modest neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, raised by a mother named Ruth who worked double shifts at the hospital and prayed over him every night, even when he pretended not to notice. His father, Joseph, left early, leaving behind a silence that settled into Michael's bones and followed him into adulthood. By 34, Michael had a decent job fixing HVAC systems, a one-bedroom apartment that always felt colder than it should, and a habit of keeping people at a distance. He believed independence was the same thing as strength, even as loneliness crept into his evenings and made itself comfortable. Sarah entered his life during a service call on a blistering July afternoon. She worked the front desk at a small accounting office, her smile polite but tired, her eyes carrying a depth that hinted at long nights and quiet sacrifices. She had moved in with her father, Thomas, after her mother's passing, giving up dreams of travel and art school to keep the household afloat. Over time, Sarah and Michael developed a gentle friendship built on coffee breaks and shared exhaustion. They never spoke of love, but there was comfort in the way they understood each other's silences. Thomas was a man of strong faith and stronger opinions. He believed order was sacred and that a woman should not waste her youth waiting for a man who could not commit. When he expressed his concern to Sarah, it was less a demand and more a warning about time slipping away. Sarah carried those words to Michael not as pressure, but as vulnerability. She was tired of being strong alone. Michael saw that, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life where someone stayed. What followed was not a fairy tale. Sarah moved into Michael's apartment with little more than a suitcase and a box of old photographs. The space felt too small for two people and too quiet for the weight of their unspoken fears. Michael struggled with the idea of responsibility, with sharing decisions, with letting someone see his failures. Sarah struggled with guilt, feeling she had betrayed her father's expectations and her own cautious heart. Nights passed where they lay awake, backs turned, wondering if they had mistaken comfort for love. The challenges came quickly. Michael's work hours were cut during the winter, and the bills multiplied. Sarah took on freelance bookkeeping jobs late into the night, her eyes red with fatigue, her hands aching from numbers that never seemed to add up. They argued without words, through sighs and silences, through doors closed a little too hard. Michael felt himself slipping back into old habits, shutting down when things became difficult. Sarah felt invisible, her sacrifices unnoticed. One evening, after a particularly hard day, Michael found Sarah asleep on the couch, paperwork scattered around her like fallen leaves. He noticed the tear stains on her cheeks, the way her brow furrowed even in rest. Something shifted inside him then. He remembered his mother's prayers, her belief that love was not a feeling but a choice made daily. Michael sat on the floor beside the couch and made a quiet promise to become the man Sarah deserved, even if it scared him. Change did not come overnight, but it came steadily. Michael asked for extra certifications at work, pushing himself to learn new systems and take on tougher jobs. Sarah enrolled in online courses to finish the degree she had abandoned years ago, studying during lunch breaks and early mornings. They began to pray together, not with eloquent words, but with honesty about their fears and hopes. Slowly, the apartment warmed, not just with better insulation, but with laughter returning to its walls. Thomas visited one Sunday afternoon, expecting tension and regret. Instead, he found a home filled with the smell of fresh bread and the quiet confidence of two people growing together. He saw the way Michael listened when Sarah spoke, the way Sarah's eyes lit up when she talked about her plans. Without saying much, Thomas placed his hand on Michael's shoulder in a gesture of acceptance that felt like forgiveness and blessing combined. The years that followed tested them again and again. Michael faced a serious injury that kept him from work for months. Sarah lost a close friend unexpectedly, shaking her faith to its core. But each trial deepened their bond. They learned that love was not proven in grand gestures, but in sitting through hospital waiting rooms, in making soup from scratch, in choosing patience when frustration felt easier. They married quietly in a small church in Indiana, surrounded by a handful of friends and family. Ruth cried through the entire ceremony, thanking God for answered prayers she had whispered decades earlier. Michael looked at Sarah, not with the fear of needing her, but with gratitude for choosing each other every day. Their life was still simple, still marked by challenges, but it was full. As time passed, they opened their home to others in need. A young man named Andrew who had aged out of foster care stayed on their couch for a year. A single mother named Grace found support and encouragement at their kitchen table. Michael realized that the thing he once feared, commitment, had become the very source of his strength. Sarah found her voice again, her art returning in quiet sketches that captured ordinary moments made sacred by love. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that broken beginnings can still lead to beautiful endings, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video. Your interaction helps spread hope to someone who may be standing where Michael once stood. Before the story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and share whether you believe love is a choice, a calling, or a miracle born from both. On a quiet evening years later, Michael sat at the same kitchen table, now worn smooth by time and togetherness. Sarah stood behind him, her hand steady, her presence no longer fragile but strong. The bills were paid, the apartment had grown into a house, and the fear that once ruled his life had softened into gratitude. Michael understood then that when Sarah had brought him her father's words, it was not a demand that changed him, but an invitation. An invitation to stay, to grow, and to love beyond his limits. And in choosing to stay, he had finally come home.